Welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I want to talk about fat loss, misconceptions, maybe some advice that's not necessarily mainstream when it comes to fat loss and things that you should leave behind in 2026. So before we dive into that topic, I just want to go over a few ways that not a few ways. I just want to go over my free body recomp checklist, and within that checklist, I go over 10 things you need for body recomp, the two types of body recomp, the importance of focusing on body comp over weight. And so, if you're interested in that, it's completely free. Make sure you go and grab that. The link to that is in the show notes. So let's dive into these. So again, these are maybe somewhat unpopular opinions, maybe some misconceptions. I think it's a blend of all these, or maybe things that, maybe you hear a lot of people say around fat loss that I don't necessarily agree with on there. So the first one is it's just a lack of willpower. This is one that I see get floated around, right? Of, hey, just, you're just not losing weight because you don't have the willpower, right? If you just, ate less, you'd be good to go. Well, I think anyone that says that is not very understanding of what happens from a physiological standpoint. Maybe when somebody gets to a higher body weight, or, when you do start to drop body weight, right? So let's first take it from the, again, let's first go with the person that is, maybe they haven't made great choices over time and now they are overweight or a little bit higher body fat percentage, and they want to drop weight and they're just having trouble sticking with it, right? Again, it's like, hey, you just need to eat less, you're good to go. And if you don't eat less, again, it's a lack of willpower. But what people don't understand is that, when we get to these higher levels of body fat, there's just a lot of dysfunction going on, right? Physiologically. And so what you'll see happen is, these hunger cues, hunger signals are out of whack. And so, you're going to have this disproportionate hunger based on, what you would, from what you would expect, right? And so that's where something like a GLP-1 really does come into handy for this specific avatar to really help with that dysregulation of appetite. And a lot of it has to do with some of it has to do with leptin, and which is the satiety hormone, leptin resistance, right? That is definitely a big factor at play. And so, but again, GLP-1s can also help with things in the gut and whatnot. And that's going to have a huge role here for this specific avatar. So for that person, again, you could sit there and be like, hey, make better choices, do this, do that, eat less food. But there is this dysregulation going on that is going to make that very challenging, right? And that's kind of where the food noise kind of comes in, right? That this person is overly hungry for what you would expect there. So just keep that in mind, that for this person, it's not really a lack of willpower. It's really a physiological mismatch. And from a physiological standpoint, things are just haywire. And so, again, using something like a GLP-1 can be really helpful for this avatar. Otherwise, yes, we can do things that would help this person be in a better position to drop body fat. But even then, it's like, again, you're still going to see that appetite dysregulation. And so it is going to come down to, and I think this is where things would come hand in hand with the other avatar that I'm about to speak to here with this lack of willpower is, setting this person up from a good habit standpoint, setting them up from a environment standpoint, also, letting them know what to expect and what's going on, and that there's not necessarily anything wrong with them, right? Especially, again, if we aren't able to use GLP-1 for whatever reason, right? And understanding that, like, yes, you do need to make this person still needs to make those decisions, but they, letting them understand that, again, where their physiology is at is really what's causing this haywire and what can make it more challenging. So like I said, that's where, again, setting up the right environment, setting up the right habits, getting a good diet, getting good overall diet quality dialed in, making sure they're exercising, like those do really, they help. But, setting them up to be in the best position and explaining to them what is going to be going on, maybe when they are in certain environments, right? Hey, when you go to social events, here's what's going to happen. You're going to probably be hungry. Here's some things that we can do to ensure that, you're going to be less hungry, but you just have to understand that that's going to be there. And so understanding what's going on, I think can really help, somebody, one, be easier on themselves, and then help them make better decisions versus just being like, hey, you need more willpower, because then it becomes, there's other things going on at that point from a psychological standpoint. But let's take another person here. Let's say that you already have that person that is maybe overweight and they're at that point. But now let's say even if somebody's overweight and they're dropping weight, or they start to get super lean, when you drop weight, your body will start to ramp up hunger cues, right? Everything tastes amazing, and everything pushes you towards, and your body pushes you towards moving less and expending less energy, right? And all this is largely subconscious. And the worse this gets worse the more weight you lose, the worse your methods are, and the quicker the weight loss is. And then to top it off, our environment is loaded with calorie dense, tasty foods that already make it tough to not overeat. And so when we start to drop weight, our body senses this energy deficit. And so again, it's going to, everything that you feel is just going to push you to getting into a energy surplus, right? Again, like I said, food's going to taste better, so it's going to be harder to moderate it, and so you're going to overeat more calories. But then the other thing is your body is going to push you to move less subconsciously, and everything's going to drive you if you're not intentional with what you're doing, and you don't have habits set in place, and you're not, either monitoring these things or actively pushing yourself to move more. And if you're just kind of going by how you feel and what you do, your body is going to drive you to move less, which is going to decrease how many calories you're expending throughout the day. And then there's also things that as you lose more weight and as you get leaner, there's things from a total daily energy expenditure that will also go down just from losing weight, right? And this is something that we don't necessarily have full control over. There's some things that we can do to help mitigate this process, right? Making sure we're not dropping weight too quickly, having good diet quality, making sure that you're weight training in the process, making sure you're not just, making sure you're recovering, making sure you're eating enough protein. There's some things we can do to slow that down, but that is largely out of our control because a lot of it is based on genetics and your overall body fat percentage, right? Which, again, as you get leaner and leaner, these things are going to start to show up even more, right? And this is why people tend to not be able to lose, they get stuck if they're not careful, right? They get stuck, they see results for a while, and then if they're not intentional, they'll end up getting in this spot where they again, they just can't push through. And a lot of it has to come down to everything is pushing you, and if you're not intentional day in and day out with what you're doing, a little bit here and there really can slow things down. Right. So again, it's important you learn how your body responds to fat loss, where your physiology is at in general, and how your habits impact your ability to stay on track and managing the modern environment instead of thinking it's simply a willpower issue or, hey, yeah, just thinking it's because technically it is a willpower issue. And what I mean by that is, ultimately you make the decision, but there's things that are going to make it tougher to do that. And so, my goal with clients is to give them the tools to be able to manage that, right, over time. So again, to me, it's not just a willpower issue. And anyone who says, hey, you just need to eat less, like they're missing, they don't understand what is actually going on from that perspective. And then, to go off this, so number two is you're stuck because you're eating too few calories. Now, again, this can be true in the sense that you have such a low calorie goal that it leads to you overeating at some point. But also keep in mind the natural drive to move less, eat more calories, plus the modern environment that is all largely subconscious, right? So it's like you could be eating less in the sense that, like I said, your calorie goal, let's say, is 1,200, and you eat 1,200 calories, and that's so low that then when you're around, you have an off day, or you decide not to track, or you have one off meal, or you overeat at one meal. Now, because you're trying to diet, you're restricting yourself. You overeat, and again, there's that drive to overeat plus to expend less calories, and that's going to be the thing that as a whole you're at maintenance or end up being in the surplus, even though you're tracking 1,200 calories. And it's like, well, it's because I'm not eating enough. And it's like, yeah, you're not eating enough in the sense that over restriction on being super low calorie is leading to issues elsewhere along the week, but it's not because you're eating too little, right? You're not stuck because you're eating too little. The only way this could be somewhat true is if you've already lost 10% or more of your body weight recently, then that could be the case where you do need to take a break, and you would potentially need to reverse out for at least a little bit of time, but you're not eating too few calories, right? Like that, it's not because you're in this like starvation mode or whatever it may be. Like that's not the case. It's just, again, somewhere along the lines, for the reasons that we just mentioned, you're consuming more calories than you think. So again, your body will adapt. There will be some metabolic adaptation that goes on, but again, it's not going to be anything that's going to be detriment. Like you're not going to be able to not drop weight, right? As I said, typically when people are eating, say 1,200 calories and they're not losing weight, it simply comes down to one, somewhere along the week, they're over consuming calories elsewhere because they have to be restrict to get to 1,200 because that's a tough calorie amount to eat, or there's just tracking errors going on, right? We tend to be to not be good at reporting calories, right? Like even if you are really skilled at tracking, you could still be off by a couple hundred calories. But then obviously, if somebody's going straight to 1,200 calories, that tells me that their tracking skill probably isn't great. And so they're probably missing out on calories somewhere along the lines there. Another one is training differently during fat loss. So to me, training needs to remain largely unchanged. You don't need to do more like quote unquote fat loss burning workouts or more boot camp circuit style workouts. If anything, your training may need to go down, not up. And so, there's this kind of myth that, oh, hey, you need to change your training. You need to do more fat burning type stuff. And you just need to do a ton of exercise because now you're, trying to drop body fat, which as I just said here, like, if anything, our volume may need to go down a bit, not necessarily up. And so in a fat loss phase, training may look like, 2 to 4 lifting sessions per week, 1 to 3 cardio sessions for fitness, not for fat loss. We're not doing cardio to lose body fat. We're doing it to maintain our cardiovascular fitness and to prove that and all the benefits of cardiovascular fitness training. And then you're looking at 8 to 12K plus steps per day. Like to me, that's, for my clients, that's typically what we're at in a fat loss phase. And our driver of fat loss is going to be, watching our caloric intake and working on that and spending more time dialing that in. And also to go back to what I said initially here in the first couple ones, also dialing in their environment, making sure they are set up to be successful in today's modern environment and whatever they have, right? Like those are going to be the main drivers, not just like, oh, hey, now you need to go, we need to go have this fat burning workout that you do 5 times a week and we need to do a bunch more training. As I said, a lot of times, with clients, like training volume may actually go down a little bit, which is kind of counterintuitive for people there with that. Because again, we need to manage our recovery. If we just, ramp up training with a lower calorie intake, our body will adapt to that. And again, the larger the output is and the lower the calories are and the larger that gap is, again, the more the body will compensate there. So what happens is you end up doing a lot of things, working super hard. So you dig yourself into a recovery hole, you add fatigue, but then we're not actually adapting, right? Your body is just sort of trying to ensure that recovery is there, and it spends more time, trying to get recovery in check. And again, it's not in adaptation mode; it's more in survival mode, if that makes sense. When I say adapting, I mean like from a fat loss perspective, right? It doesn't want to change body comp. It's going to be a bit more stingy with dropping body fat when it's in that state there. So again, with weight training, we just want to make sure we get in, send the signal to at least maintain the muscle that we have. In our cardio sessions, we want to moderate our intensity like we would do at any point in time. And again, we're doing it for the cardiovascular fitness benefits. Obviously, it can be a nice tool to add extra calorie burn into the day, but that's not the main reason we're doing it. And then obviously our main driver of increasing our energy expenditure is going to be through overall movement. Again, I think 8 to 12K steps per day is solid. You can certainly go higher than that if you have the time. And again, the recovery allows for it because that's going to be the key thing. We don't want to, it's not that we need to get up to 30,000 steps and do as much. If you do that, again, we would have to make sure that we would increase our caloric intake to match that output while still maintaining a deficit. The next is, and this goes in hand to hand with what I was just saying, is more activity / training equals more fat loss. More activity and training can help, but it needs to match your recovery. Just trying to ramp up training and activity for the sake of quote unquote fat burning will just lead to burnout and spinning your wheels. So that is a common thing is, hey, I'm going into a fat loss phase. Now I just need to move as much as possible. I need to do as much training as possible. As we just talked about, it's not the goal. We want to maintain our activity levels and we want to do enough. And maybe we do a little bit more overall movement in terms of steps during this time, but just because you're moving more doesn't mean that necessarily leads to more fat loss, right? And again, in sometimes like that extra activity, if we're not accounting for our caloric intake, could lead to overconsumption of calories if we're not managing that. So another one is, does it matter what you eat as long as calories are good? So again, yes, calories are the most important when it comes to changing body weight, dropping body fat, but the lower your diet quality is overall, the tougher it's going to be to stick to your fat loss goal, right? We want to have some flexibility, but we can't swing too far. We can't just be super flexible. We want to get enough protein, we want to eat enough fiber, and we want to have quality carbs and fats in our diet. We don't just want to, eat all junk food or all highly processed food and be like, hey, well, my calories are good. Again, some people can get away with that. Some people can do that, but that's really a short-term thing. And I think from a long-term health perspective and long-term fat loss perspective and, staying on track past a couple of weeks, I do think that's going to be challenging just because, again, once we start to lose weight, as I talked about, there's going to be that drive to start to, push your body to eat more calories. There's going to be that drive to consume, to move less. And if we also sprinkle in on top of that, lower fiber foods, again, that doesn't mean we need to just eat as much fiber. We need a good base of fiber, and we're probably good at that point. But if we are getting no fiber, we're eating all highly processed food, junk food, just focused on calories, it's going to be really hard to eat in the right amount of calories as you continue to drop weight. Again, as I said, that's a short-term strategy that can work to help, somebody maybe see some fat loss and get things headed in the right direction. But eventually we're going to want to focus on our diet quality and make sure that is in check. And so again, being careful with playing things like macro Tetris, where you're just kind of like, oh, hey, I can fit all this tasty food in and I'm good to go there. And again, it really just comes down to one, we obviously need to make sure we get enough protein in to help from a body comp perspective. But as I said, the more you lose weight, the more food is going to taste better, and the leaner you get, the larger the deficit is, and you have more of these tasty foods in there. They're going to taste better, and it's going to be really hard to moderate them, especially when we think of super calorie dense foods. You don't feel like you're eating a lot of food, but the calories can start to rack up pretty quickly, right? So again, we want to have a good base. This is probably, again, another big thing that I see with clients when it comes to fat losses. Again, we want to have some social flexibility and be able, but trying to fit in too many drinks, trying to, have too many social events and not making the choices that we need to make, like that can become problematic over time there, right? So again, it's all about finding that balance in what works for sure, but just understand the lower the quality of the diet is, the tougher it's going to be for you to continue to drop body weight, right? Again, you could do it to a certain point, but then you always kind of come to that sticking point there. I know for me, anytime I fat loss diet, when I try to be overly flexible, that's when things start to slow down, unfortunately, right? And so I think, again, the big takeaway too is, that's why we don't always want a fat loss diet, because we do want to have that flexibility in terms of social events and things like that there. Another misconception that you need to leave behind is like, oh, hey, you're tracking your calories, so you should just automatically lose weight, right? Like that's a big thing that I see is like, hey, I want to lose fat. I'm going to start tracking my calories, and because I want to do those things, I should just automatically lose body fat. But again, tracking calories, it's a tool to help us quantify how much we're consuming. It can help us, it can keep people accountable for sure in terms of like, if you are tracking, it's like, hey, if you don't track, you don't really, you can kind of like just ignore what you ate. It's like, yeah, I ate that, but I didn't track it, so I'm good to go. I don't really have to face that. Right? Whereas when we track, you do have to put it in, and you do see it and everything like that. And so I think it can help from an accountability standpoint from that perspective. But saying that, just because we're tracking, there's no magic to tracking. It's not like, oh, hey, you track your food, now you're automatically going to be on track. Like we still have to eat in the right amounts. And this is, this kind of comes back to like sometimes, clients will be like, oh, hey, I'll go back and put that food in, from 3 days ago. It's like, at this point, it doesn't matter, because what you actually eat is the most important. And if you are tracking, say days later, or you're tracking at the end of the day, you don't have a game plan, like, again, that is going to be another thing that you're going to struggle with in terms of dropping body fat. So just because we're tracking calories doesn't automatically mean that you're going to see results, right? Because tracking is a skill and it takes time to develop there. And as I said earlier, research shows us that people are not good at, like, we underreport calories. And I think the worse your skill is, more off that's going to be. And so just understanding that's the case. But again, tracking is there's no magic to tracking your food. It's, again, a way to quantify what we're eating, so we can we can put some sort of number, not monetary, but we can put some sort of number to that, so we can adjust if we need to there. And again, the accountability, that's really the two main reasons that I feel like, and it helps with education too, in terms of, hey, here's kind of what's in food, and it can build that education as well too. But again, there is no magic to it. It's like, again, hey, I'm tracking, I should be good to go, I should lose body fat. But unfortunately, we still need to make the right choices. It needs to be aligned with what we're doing. And, again, just slashing calories is not always going to be the answer as well, too. So again, we still need to properly fuel in a fat loss phase. And that leads me to my next one, is just slash calories and skip meals, right? Yes, we need to create an energy deficit, and the best way to do that is to lower your caloric intake, but we still need to properly fuel for fat loss. And so just slashing calories can work in the short term, but long term, it leads to burnout, spinning your wheels, and potentially muscle loss, depending on what we're doing. And so what I mean by this is, I feel like a lot of people that when they get to a fat loss phase, it's like, oh, hey, I skipped that meal, it's good to go. Like, I'm eating less. Hey, I'm just eating, kind of like a bird, right? Where it's just like super small portions of things. Hey, I'm trying to lose weight, so I just need to eat less overall, which, again, is true. But, if you just have a plate that's, very small portion wise, that is going to come back, right? And this comes back to the diet quality thing that I discussed earlier. Like, that is super important. We need to make sure that we still have good diet quality. But as I said, we still need to properly fuel for fat loss. We can't just slash calories. I think that's a big misconception is when people take the sort of just calorie approach, is just eating less and just, like I said, having smaller portions. But I think it's important that we fuel properly. And so what does that mean? What does fueling properly mean in a fat loss phase? Well, again, it's eating enough finding out what that is for you, right? Depending on exactly what your goals are, but not just slashing calories to as low as possible, but that right amount to where you're going to still be in an energy deficit, but it's also not anything that's going to lead to like being overly hungry later or any large gaps in terms of micronutrients and even macros as well too. But again, it's also, like I said, it's making sure your macros are there, making sure that's well balanced. But then also from a micronutrient standpoint, making sure we're not overlooking anything from that perspective. Fiber, like making sure you're getting in enough fiber. And then also from a training perspective, making sure that you're feeling around your workouts, so you can feel your training, because we still want to have some good training sessions while we're fat loss dieting. So again, and then also properly fueling for fat loss can also mean adding in some days at maintenance as well too, right? So again, really, I think the big thing is just slashing calories and just skipping meals. Hey, I did good this week. I didn't eat that meal because I just didn't want to eat. Because really what happens when, we're not properly fueling for fat loss and we're just slashing calories or we're skipping meals is, this comes back to, again, another point I made earlier is, you may be restricting at certain periods of time throughout your week, but as a whole, you can't really trick your body. And again, this comes back to once the body senses an energy deficit, other deficits in terms of, maybe a micronutrient deficiency, like you're going to feel hungry. And then again, there's also going to be that drive to move less and expend less energy as well too. And so again, it always kind of catches up elsewhere throughout your week, really without you noticing. So that's where, again, just slashing calories and skipping meals can be an impact you. And then, the final one here is going to be eat whenever, so long as calories are in check, you're good to go. So again, this comes back to just the kind of basic calories in, calories out. Calories are all that matters. I've seen this like a lot where, hey, you can't eat late at night because, you're going to gain a bunch of fat. And then you say to the person like, nope, that's false because calories are the number one thing that matters. Well, again, that's true. I do feel like meal timing really can make fat loss much tougher, and you might get less out of what you're currently doing, right? So when you eat, to me, does matter, especially when it comes to, maybe fat loss has been a little bit challenging for you. Because again, if you just taken that approach of, hey, eat whatever, eat whenever, as long as calories are in check, right? Eat whatever, eat whenever, as long as calories are in check, which is a challenge. Do whatever you want. I feel like that can really make fat loss challenging for people, right? We're just almost giving them, we don't want to be overly restrictive, but we do need to be somewhat restrictive, especially in today's modern environment. And too much flexibility can also bite people as well too. And so, one night of poor meal timing is not going to impact you, but if you're consistently saving all your calories for the evening, I think you're going to struggle. I think if you take someone who improves their meal timing, they balance, they try to get more of their food in earlier in the day. And again, we'll talk about what good meal timing can look like here, versus someone who, again, is just skipping meals, trying to save calories for later. I guarantee you the person that is improving their meal timing is going to have a much easier time seeing results with less friction, and they're going to have better body composition at the end than somebody who is, just kind of winging their nutrition and meal timing. And so again, what would I want to do from a meal timing perspective? Well, I'm looking at, hey, more calories earlier in the day, right? Having your meals relatively balanced throughout the day, right? Like avoiding really long gaps of food. So having a consistent, meal timing from day to day. Again, avoiding large meals late at night. And again, avoiding having, say, more than like 50% of your calories at night, especially later at night there. Now, one caveat to this is if you do get pretty lean, having some carbohydrates before sleep can be helpful from a sleep perspective. But again, generally speaking, more people need to eat more calories earlier in the day and then less as they get later and later into the night there. And then also having more calories around your workouts can also be helpful, right? Because if you're skipping meals throughout the day, saving all your calories for later, you're working out, yeah, you're getting your workout in, but I would imagine your performance is not as good as it could be. Excuse me. And so that is going to show up from a body comp perspective there. So again, we do want to focus on meal timing. I think, again, when I come back to, hey, we want to set people up for success just because, the modern environment is not designed to have somebody drop body fat. If anything, it's to do the complete opposite, obviously, right? That's why people that aren't intentional with what they're doing, become overweight, and why a lot of people are overweight now. But again, if we can set up meal timing, like that's going to help somebody be able to stay on track better if they do have events come up, or they are starting to get to the point where, like, hey, they've lost a good amount of weight, they want to continue to get leaner, but things are slowing down a little bit there. So that's it for the maybe unpopular opinions, right? Because I feel like some of these, like the meal timing, it's you had the pendulum where it was, hey, don't eat after 6, otherwise you're going to gain a bunch of body fats. And then it was like pendulum swung the other way when flexible dieting became popular of like, hey, calories are all that matters, eat whenever you want. And to me, I think it needs to be in the middle and slightly to, hey, we want to, meal timing can really impact things, right? So there's that. And then again, with the flexible calorie approach, right? The flexible dieting approach, oh, hey, just eat whatever you want as long as calories are in check, which again, there's, you don't need to eat just chicken, broccoli, and rice, but we need to have good diet quality during fat loss, right? Right. So some of these are just things that again maybe people have in their mind, or I feel like maybe the fitness industry has kind of swung the pendulum one way and then way back the other way on there. And so and then the willpower one's a big one, right? Like you just kind of see comments all the time from like people on Instagram and like Twitter and stuff like that, or X or whatever the hell it's called now, of like, it's just willpower. You need to, like, and again, I think that just, it sends the wrong message, and people don't fully understand what is going on there. So hopefully leave these behind in 2026. And when I made this post, I was like, I think that makes sense. But now that I'm saying it again, I don't know if that makes sense. So like basically what we want to leave behind, we want to leave these behind. We want to leave them behind for 2025, but in 2026, we don't want to bring these to 2026, right? So hopefully that makes sense there. So that's it for this episode. If you guys found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find it. And then if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. Give me a follow, say hi. I'll probably say hi if you don't. And that's it for now. Talk to you guys soon.